My special guest today has enjoyed one of the most successful and extraordinary music careers of all time. And that song, When a Man Loves a Woman. Michael Bolton is my special guest on today's podcast. And sleep well, sleep better? I do. My Blankwell. MyBlankwell.com. Listen at the end of the podcast for a limited time only special offer. Two-time Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and longtime social activist. He has sold more than 65 million records globally. He has enjoyed one of the most successful and extraordinary music careers of all time. I am truly humbled to welcome to my show, Michael Bolton.
Can I keep that introduction for other interviews?
Please do.
Thank you very, very much. And you just reminded me that I've been at this for a long, long time.
A wonderful long time. Can you take us back where it all started, 11 or 12 years old?
I was in New Haven, Connecticut. My family was raising us, basically, mostly in New Haven on the Boulevard. I was born in Yale New Haven Hospital. It was called Grace New Haven Hospital. And when I was about 10 or 11, I started singing along with a lot of pop music on the radio. It didn't matter who, I just loved music, and I didn't realize it till about 15 years later that I was hearing all the harmony parts my friends weren't hearing. So I had this kind of early passion for music, and it was number one, and I never got a plan B, so I just pursued music. And I was signed, when I was 16, I was signed with Epic Records. My parents both, although they were divorced, they supported my pursuit of music and leaving school to sign with Epic Records and become an artist. And I was 16, thought I'd made it. I didn't know what I was doing in the recording studio, but people kept giving me compliments who were in the business. And that felt encouraging, and it was really important looking back. 18 years later, I had my first hit record as an artist. I was 34.
Wow.
So every time someone tells me that they're going to do Idol or The Voice or a TV show and make it in a year or two, I just look at them and go, well, be prepared for it to take a little more time than that.
18 years later, what kept you going during those times? Because I read that you said somewhere it was like getting those little cups of water in the desert.
That's when, looking back, that's what it felt like. But those cups of water, I mean, let me describe the desert first. The desert was having 7 or 8 different contracts with different record companies over those 18 years. Production companies that went out of business while I was making the record, albums that didn't sell more than 12 or 13 copies, depending on how many my parents bought. Wasn't funny then.
No.
But looking back, I just kept trying slightly different directions, but I didn't realize I was writing so much music as well, because even the albums that didn't succeed required 12 or 13, 14 songs, and they expected me to write them. So I was developing a skill that I hadn't planned on, which was songwriting. And there came a time when some friends of mine said, you really should consider writing songs for other people while you're pursuing a career as an artist, because something incredible happens when you write successfully, and it's called food.
Food.
And food definitely was very helpful at that time, because the desert also consisted of periods of time in between record contracts where there was no income. You know, I had a wife and 3 kids, and we had our hands full, but mostly I would try to keep the stress away from them. They didn't know exactly how bad it was.
Was there ever a point during that time, wife, 3 kids, that you were going to say, no more, something else?
I don't recall a time when I was going to say, that's it, as much as the time that I would always say, okay, what do I do now? What studio will have me? I don't have the money for a recording studio. I have no budget. How do I get some new songs recorded? I had this very strange parallel world that was giving me those cups of water, giving me encouragement, giving me a sense of belief that there was something great on the other side of the desert, and that I wasn't just making life harder on myself and my family. Because every time I just couldn't think of what to do next, someone said, hey, you're not signed with that company anymore? Why don't you come to Memphis and we'll put you in the studio there? And we have great musicians and write some new songs and we'll put together an album deal. I was almost no extended period of time where someone in the business didn't show up and say, come on over here and let's make a record and see what happens. It just kept happening over 18 years until I signed with Columbia Records. And I signed, almost the same time, I signed a contract with a publishing company to write songs for other artists. When I started writing songs for other artists, that's when I started feeling like we're okay. My family's going to be okay. Even if I don't have a hit as an artist, my songs are being recorded by all these famous and artists that I was fans of, when I was a kid. I started getting country covers, Kenny Rogers and Conway Twitty. It's funny because it went from Conway Twitty to one day Kanye West, sampling two of my songs. I started feeling that, other people were believing in me, and they were artists and producers. So that credibility spilled over into a form of, encouragement and belief that I used moving forward. And then something really pivotal happened in 1986. Towards the end of 85, I had done 4 rock albums, 2 with my band Blackjack, and 2 for Columbia Records. I was signed to Columbia Records. And the president of the company called me into his office. It felt like I was being called into the principal's office for a sit down. And my manager and I sat down, and he said, okay, so we've done 2 albums. Usually that's when you know whether you're going to have a successful career or not. But here's the deal. I want to make another album with you, but I don't want you to do a rock album. I want you to write and then keep those songs for yourself, the kind of songs you're giving to all these other artists. I want songs that are about your voice and your story, because the secretaries and the people who are working on this floor are taking your demos home and playing them at home. I had no idea. Nobody had told me that before. And I said, well, that's easy. I'd love to do that. Let's make an album of the kind of songs, ballads and R&B songs, and 4-minute movies about emotional life. And not only was he right, his name was Al Teller, the president of Columbia. The very next album, that one that I handed in, became my first hit album, 1987, The Hunger. And that became the direction of my career.
Simply amazing.
It's pretty, looking back, even hearing myself say this, it is pretty miraculous looking back.
Yeah. With all the icons you've written for, performed with, who has influenced you and inspired you the most, if you could pick? I don't even know how you could pick.
That's a tough one, because I would say like one of the first ones was Bill Medley, the Righteous Brothers. The Righteous Brothers were an automatic when I sat down at a restaurant. The jukebox, I believe it was 10 cents for a single and 3 for a quarter. I used to play the Righteous Brothers. You've lost that love and feeling. Eventually, I became good friends with the guy who wrote it, Barry Mann, and his wife, Cynthia Weil. So I got to meet a lot of my heroes through writing songs and through eventually becoming an artist. But there are so many important people I've done events with. Bill Medley called me because the publishers who got the song placed on his album knew that I was a huge fan of his and of the Righteous Brothers most of my childhood, most of my life. And the next thing I knew, I was in my music studio, and I had the phone against my ear, and I heard, Bill Medley here. Michael, I just want to thank you for sending me that great song. And by the way, you have a great voice, so keep singing. And I was just like a little kid. When I hung up the phone, I was just quiet. That was Bill Medley. So there's so many people. I would have to say, I don't like to say I prefer one version or one cover over another, because there are R&B music, R&B songs, country songs. Kenny Rogers performed a song of mine. I was a fan of his. And he told me when I was about 35, 36, that he thought to him, I was the best singer pound for pound in the business.
Wow.
And that was like somebody played a practical joke and said, go up and tell that guy he's the best singer in the business.
Amazing.
And it was at the Grammys. I just had so many great people and producers who are really hard to get to pay the highest compliment by recording one of your songs. You know, getting on a Barbra Streisand album was an enormous event, and I got to share that with my mother, who was, a huge fan of hers, all of her childhood and all of her life. And there's so many moments that I had that my mother did get to see near the end of her 95-year-long
God bless
life. My father didn't get to see a lot of it, but he believed it was going to happen more than I did.
Wow. That's something. Is there anyone that you haven't collaborated with that you would like to?
Yeah, I would love to write with Stevie Wonder. I was at a Motown 35th anniversary television show, and I saw him, and I asked somebody who worked for the show, could you please introduce me to Stevie Wonder? And they walked over to him and spoke to him, and then about 15 seconds later, they were walking him to me, and he started singing How Am I Supposed to Live Without You to me.
No.
It almost sounds ridiculous hearing myself say
No,
it.
but that even made my heart skip.
No, I mean, so, imagine your greatest influences and, favorite singers or favorite journalists, favorite speakers, whoever you respect and have enjoyed through the years, knowing your work after the 18 years of nobody wanting to know your work. It's not enough to make a living from.
Pretty remarkable. If you just tuned in, Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and longtime social activist Michael Bolton is on with me. Okay. And by the way, growing up, your albums, your songs, all the love, all the relations, I was all about all that. Tell us about writing a song for Coretta Scott King. I mean...
So that's a powerful moment in time. Thank you for reminding me. My parents were very progressive, very active in politics in New Haven. And my father raised us in a way that gave us certain values that I'm very proud of and thankful to my parents for. And one of them turned into this great appreciation of Martin Luther King Jr., who had come to New Haven to speak. And along the way, I don't know what year it was, I did an event that was a collaboration and put me in the march that they did every year in Atlanta in honor of Martin Luther King. And I was basically marching just a few people away from Coretta Scott King,